We are back, episode 9, Precious Metal Gents. I'm Zan, here with Brian. Thanks for joining us tonight. It is the National Week. A lot of people are already there. I think festivities started on Tuesday night, going through Sunday. I will be leaving tomorrow. We're recording this on Wednesday night. I'll be leaving Thursday. Had to change my flight a little bit to ensure that I could be there, but looking forward to walking the floor, seeing a lot of friendly faces. And because this is National Week, we just did not have quite the time to prepare a set showcase or a guest collector. So you're going to have to hear Brian and I wax poetic about Brett Favre again. But Brian, how are you doing? How are you feeling about National Week from the sidelines?
Doing great. I'm not going, but just before we started recording today, had the first post in the Packers group chat about a car that was available that I was looking at getting, and literally within about 5 minutes of me messaging the person back saying, "Yeah, pick it up for me or try to get it for me," he went to the dealer and it was already gone. So again, the struggles in the life of being a Packers collector, and I mean it was an Antonio Freeman card, so it wasn't like it was anything that's huge on anybody else's radar,
But it shows you. If I think I heard this on a podcast, I forget. I think it was Stacking Slabs, but someone said something to the effect of, or maybe it was Carlson, something to the effect of like, if you see something on your first pass and it's on your list, get it if it's within your budget. Because, and I can attest to that to somewhat going last year, and I think that I got a Pedro 99 rubies on my first pass because it was on my list, and I had seen enough tables to know that finding a card like that was going to be more of an anomaly than it was going to be customary for the types of cards that are there. I think you see like 80 to 90% vintage / ultra modern. The 90s tables you may get. Well, last year it was maybe like 5 to 10. This year, obviously, it could be different. We've seen a big spike, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But before we get into that, Brian, what do you have for Mail Day?
got a 1999 PMG Jose Valentin PSA 6. It's my second one of the set. Don't have many of those PMGs from 99. It's kind of weird because the 98s get a lot of attention right now, yet I see more of the 98s, and I've picked up more of the 98s. Like I'm really technically 2 away from the set, but like I said before, I'm not getting the common player that never played for the Brewers, so I'm really only one in my eyes away, John Jaha. But I pick those up in like bunches, and the 99s I just rarely ever see. The only reason I got this one is because someone in that Packers group posted a Facebook post, a guy just selling all of his PMG collection, and he had 3 Brewers on there. It was, I think it was the Burnett's and the Cirillo. The person that posted this already picked up the Cirillo and the Burnett's, and then the Valentine was left. So I messaged the guy, picked this up. But yeah, it's only the second one I have now, the Valentine and the Dave Nielsen. But I'm a ways to go in that set. It just doesn't seem like I can't find any of the 99 Brewers. I mean, they're commons, so I mean they're probably sitting around in commons boxes. I'm not saying they're like super rare. It's just that set hasn't really been pulled out much because the 98s, it seems like in all the sports, get all the love. So when you have a set that's getting popularity, prices are going up, people are going to start looking for those more and posting those more. It's just kind of like a cyclical effect. So eventually these 99s will start coming out more. That's the benefit of a set being popular, is that you just start seeing it more. Even if the prices are inflated, at least it brings them out. So
I think there's a good argument to be made for the 99 as bringing, this is entirely subjective, but bringing the most, highest dollar per unit of enjoyment. You know what I mean? Like the 98s have become so outrageous, and the 97 in football is so propelled by basketball to the point where 97 Reds are typically more expensive, or well, not always, but sometimes more expensive than 99 golds, and so the 99 is really a good opportunity. I think if you really want to get into like 90s and you want to get a PMG at 99, it's going to give you your best opportunity to crack into that. I mean, you could go for red, which is at a 135, but
I mean, this doesn't even do it justice. But I mean, I've said this before. Like, I think the 99s overall look better aesthetically than most cards in general. But I mean, there's something to be said about them over even the 98s. I love the gold. The argument can be made also that there might be less 99s. I don't have any data right now to back that up, but there might be less 99s available just because it's the third year. Like, it wasn't as popular in 99. Like, the popularity waned by 99. A lot of these things were probably destroyed, sitting in commons boxes, never to be found. So I mean, it might be that scarce set. It's a good value point based on like what the 98s go for, and even the 97s in other sports. But if you want to get into a PMG market, yeah, the 99s would be a good one to break into. Great card. When you get it in hand, it's a refractor gold foil finish. I mean, it's awesome.
I think it's interesting. The way I think about it is the 99 from base to PMG, the upgrade there is sizable to me
Oh, yeah.
because the right. But if the 97 base to PMG or the 98 base to PMG, what you love is the backgrounds, and those are on the base cards. I mean, in 97 you can't even see them on the PMGs. In 98 they're there, obviously, but people love the backgrounds, but they're there on the base card. And so I think if you're looking at solely at effect, I like the scope design, sure, but if you're looking solely at effect, that gold holofoil with the player isolated, I think it's really a really well designed card, and it's good that they abandoned the backgrounds, not because I don't like them or because they're not cool, but it would have been redundant, and it would have looked like, you see every year a prism variation that's not that distinct from the prior year, but each PMG iteration is substantially different than the one prior to it.
That's arena design. I mean, we've talked about even with other sets, like their design process where they changed design. They didn't get the reason why they're so popular, obviously a number of factors, but I think one of the main reasons is that the design factor changed. Like, you look at a car and you know exactly what year it is. You mentioned Prism. Sometimes, unless you collect Prism, like you won't recognize a 2016 from a 2017 if you don't know. These, like, a 99, a 98, like there's a distinct difference. They put a lot of thought process into designing the cards. And like what you said too about the 97, I'm partial to the 97 set just because I love the foil colors. It's the first year, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, the design, it kind of ruins the design of the card. The cool part of the design is the background and like that comic background. That's why I have like the baseball and football sets just in base in a binder, just raw, because I like to flip through them and look at the actual background and remember like what they looked like. They're just cool looking cards. And yeah, the foil kind of ruins the background. The 99 for sure, it has that metallic look. It's just, I think it's like the perfect metal brand PMG card. I just think it's like the perfect look. And yeah, something can be said about the 98 circle design, especially when you look at the Jeter. It's like one of the best design cards I think ever in any generation, any era, anywhere, any sport. It's like one of the coolest looking cards. But overall, card for an entire set, like the 99, like you said, the best bang for your buck.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of you think of it in a way like you're talking about all the iterations of Prism over 12 years now, and PMGs are kind of like Barry Sanders and Calvin Johnson, right? They retired in the prime. They had a finite duration of 3 years, and they maximized that that period of time, and they maximize the design opportunities there, and to not be xeroxing the prior years basically. So speaking of 98 though, my mail day, I haven't had a great mail day in several episodes, but this one is pretty ridiculous. So first one is Bagwell 98 PMG. This one I got on eBay auction. It took I elected to send it to the vault to save the sales tax, but it took a month from start to finish to get that. The second one, Favre 98 PMG PSA 9. Back when they labeled it PMG and not precious metal gems.
Yeah, I saw that
This
on
is
there. I was laughing at the way
yeah,
they labeled it. I'm like, that's a Beckett
it's
thing to screw up a label, not PSA. But
and the guy I bought it from had 3 PSA 9s of this card, and we worked out a deal. This is where I use Fund Your Cards for this big purchase, and I don't know that I would have been able to get this without them. And card funding has become its own thing now, its own animal. We can talk more about that, but these two really, for me, represent sort of an almost a near conclusion of a 98 PMG quest. I'd like to find the Vladimir Guerrero. I don't have Robert Edwards. I'm missing Robert Edwards, and I'm also missing Willie McGinnis, which is $10,000 our best offer on eBay if I really want it. But finding these now is somewhat of a relief. I would say this is neither. I don't know that either would be my favorite of that particular player PC, but they were very high on my list. And as you know, they just don't come to market much. So if I find nothing at the National, I can rest easy knowing that I just picked up these.
there's only 2 graded copies of that Favre, right?
No. Are you talking about for PSA?
Yeah, there's 2. That's pop? That's the highest grade, right? There's pop. It's a pop.
There's
2.
a 10. There's a 10.
Oh, there is a 10.
Maybe multiple 10s. Yeah, there's 4. I think there's 4 9s because the guy I got it from had 3 9s. So he had sold one previously. I think Ryan Weber has it. I've got one, and then the guy still has one more.
Yeah, I don't know what the hell I was thinking about. I thought it was. I don't know where I was getting a pop 2 from.
May have been a different card, maybe like a 24 karat or something. But so it's kind of been weird week with the Favre stuff where I got this in, posted it, and obviously there's no relation here, but we saw some a monster Favre pop up, and then a monster sale on a Favre. So this is segueing into our card of the week showcase, but I'm going to pass it to you. I want you to talk a little bit about those 2 kind of big Favres we saw pop up. And one we talked about on our Favre episode with Ryan that we said, we may never see this. 4 or 5 weeks later, it's on eBay. But talk a little bit about those and what you kind of noticed with them.
Yeah, so this all started. I was on an episode of Stacking Slabs. I can't remember when it was. It was a few months ago. I was talking to Brett about the top Favre cards and the hierarchy a little bit that I put together, and it came out to, at the time, before I put 101s in there, this 1998 Central Credentials Now out of 4 was the number 1 card. Then when you start putting in the 101s, it changes a little bit, but that was the number 1 non-1-of-1 card. So I said at the end of the episode, I remember the ultimate from that set would be the numbered 4 out of 4. Never thinking that the thing would appear. I mean, we've never even seen the card. We know what it looks like. We can put it together because you know what the nows look like and you know what the Favre card looks like, but like no one's ever seen it. And then, yeah, we talked about it with Ryan, and then sure enough, this thing just pops up, and it was listed as an eBay auction. I think, what was it, 250,000? Or no, it wasn't an auction. It was a buy it now or best offer.
Buy it now, 250K or best offer.
So when you see stuff like that, at least for me, like the first thought goes through my head is like, wow, that I never thought I'd see this card. And then noticing that it's 4/4, it's like the ultimate. And then I'm like scrambling, what could I sell? What could I do to possibly get this card? But then I started texting you like, hey, do you want to bolster our collections and we can just split it or something?
If we just combine everything and liquidate everything, we could just split it. That maybe.
But I mean, it's like a joke, but like, didn't you think for a second like that it's actually a reasonable option? Like for a second, you had to have thought.
I mean, as soon as I saw it, I went to my box and I went through every card, and I was like, I could probably be, if I sold everything, I could probably beat the winning bid, but I don't want to. Then I have $100,000 in a card, in one card. I don't think
Right.
I could buy any more cards. So it just wasn't. It's a fun thought exercise, but you eventually, it's like kind of like seeing it for me almost gives some sense of closure. Like, I know
Right.
it's gone now, right? It's off to wherever it's off to. I've seen it. I've saved the picture because on Card Ladder, that eBay picture is going to go dead soon enough, and in several months. So I've got the picture saved. But
Yeah, because it
I
was
mean,
sold. So it was sold privately. It was listed on eBay. It lasted a little more than a day.
right?
It was sold privately to a private seller. I was told who it was, but asked to not disclose it. Prefers to remain anonymous. A very high-end private seller, so it's not like it's going to be someone that's going to buy it and then you're probably never going to see that card again. Um, Maybe if it was like passed on to somebody and they decide to sell it, but it's not going to be flipped. It's not going to appear like next week for double what he paid or anything. It was heard to have sold for, I don't know the exact price, but I heard it was sold right around the $100,000 range. I know Spinatron posted something that he made an offer on it that was a pretty substantial offer, but again, it was because it was, that was an eBay offer and it was less than, you're going to get less than what you actually listed it or made an offer for because of the fees and all that stuff. So came to an agreement offline. Probably never going to hear who it was from or who bought it, but
I thought that was strange because I did message the seller when it was taken down to see how much it sold for, and he said $100,000 to a private collector. And so I messaged Spinatron and said, was this you? This sold? Was this you? And he was shocked because he said he'd offered over 100,000. Come to find out, it was 101,000, but on eBay. But he also said that he offered it off eBay in person. And so I don't know if maybe there was something at play where, it's a negligible amount more from Spinatron. Maybe this guy decided to sell it to someone
yeah, I
local
don't know
or,
I don't know
or
if the
whatnot.
exact price was 100. It was around 100. So maybe the guy like threw another. There was a couple people involved in like working this deal, friends of people, and from what this is again hearsay from what I heard. I haven't talked to this guy. I know who it is, but I don't know the guy. I just was told, or I kind of found out who it was through process of elimination and going to keep it private. But it was, so I don't know the exact amount, but it was like around the $100,000 range. I heard. I assume it. Maybe the guy came back and was like, "Hey, I already got this offer. Like, could you do this?" And I mean, when you get to the $100,000 range, like, what's a $10,000? I mean, the point is, this thing's never going to probably appear again. So the good thing is that we saw it and we know it's locked away. It's not going to get flipped around, thrown in our faces multiple times. It's not like we're going to have really a chance at it anyway. It's good to know at least it's locked away. So,
Yeah, it was sort of like the final piece. Like, we'd seen the 98 and 99 Gem Masters. Both at 98 sold publicly, 99 sold privately. And I put a picture up of that on our feed before, or on one of these videos before. But this was sort of like the third piece of that puzzle, because I would assume most Favre collectors almost universally would have this card third, and the 4 out of 4 especially would be absolutely in the top 3, even if you maybe have it higher than Gem Masters, who knows. But now we can say we've seen them all, they've all sold, we can rest easy now.
yeah, then you had this was actually listed at auction like was it a week ago? The 97 Rubies Favre number 1 out of 50. That thing was running an auction for a week, and some crazy stuff happened with that. You want to talk about that one?
Yeah, so that's a hard card to find. I mean, we know that this particular copy, number 1 out of 50, was sold back in 2022 on PWCC. I think it was fixed, and it was like $5,800, something like that. It was it made it made it through a couple of people's hands. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how it got to auction, but we talked. I mean, a lot of us talked when this card went up. A week and a half ago, to kind of figure, hey, where are you going to be? Are you going for this? What are you thinking? And then we kind of figured out that, someone we knew was interested in pursuing this card beyond what either of us was willing to pay, or what we thought it was worth. And then I think we came to find out that at least beyond him, at least one or two more people were willing to push it beyond that. And so this card goes from $5,800 in 2022 to $21,600 on this past Sunday night when it purportedly ended, but it didn't actually end. We had this situation with Fanatics Collect where they said the extended bidding was not working for some people, and so they moved the extended bidding back another night to Monday night. And I think the card got one extra bid and finished over 22,000. And we had pegged it at what, 10 to 12 grand is what we thought maybe it was probably worth.
Yeah, I figured it was going to go, and that was even like at the high end. I thought it was, it was going to get max value just because of the amount of interest. Again, like I don't get like nosy with these things where I have to know who bought the card or I want to know who's bidding. I don't do it like just to be nosy. I do it just to kind of try to figure out, like, one with the 98. Now I wanted to know who bought it just to know if it was a collector, and that's it. With this card, I just want to know who was all bidding because I was actually considering bidding on it, but I'm not going to do it to just run up the price. On a card like this, like, you can easily just run up the price, and if everybody's going for it, it's going to have a lot of eyes. People are just going to be trying to overbid each other. So I was trying to figure out like who was going for it and just have people be honest, like what they were going to bid, because then I was going to bow out. Or if I knew like how much people were going to bid, I was going to tell them like, hey, you're going to get a bid that's going to beat you. Like, do you really want to, if you want this card, do you really want to run it up? Just let it go for what the market value would be if a person's going to outbid you and just be done with it. So we're not just overbidding each other. But it got crazy.
We almost, it's almost like we were trying to sell people on not bidding on it.
Yeah.
Because I think that was in part because the people that we knew were bidding on it, we knew, number one, had deeper pockets than either of us and our other fellow Favre collectors, and number two, that they are collectors, and that they, whether they're maybe not Favre collectors, but they are collectors generally speaking. And so we knew that it would get paid for and that they would make a serious run at it to keep it. And so I think the idea was, look, we all love this card. We all want it. So we need to refrain from bidding on it, because even if it gets to Sunday night and it's at 9 or 10K, don't jump in the ring and be like, well, now I got a shot at it, because that person who's still bidding on it is going to keep going. But obviously the card took off. We had obviously at least two people pushing up the price pretty high, and that kind of, I can't be. I was maybe a little annoyed at first, but I can't be mad about it, because, like I said, if someone's going to pay for what they're going to pay for it, fine. It's going to make it very difficult for us to get that card now. We're not going to be able to get it on fixed or best offer. We're not going to be able to get a show because we're beholden to that price now. And so we have to wait for probably not the next auction, maybe 2 or 3 auctions, because the guy who lost this auction is probably going to go for it on the next auction. And there's a trickle down effect there. And so now it's a real chase card, like an out of 50 real chase card that's going to be really difficult to obtain at a reasonable price.
I guess my frustration with the whole thing is that, again, we talked about, we know who got it, collector. I just want these cards to fall in collectors' hands. I have a lot of questions about, and I'm going to say this now, I'm happy that the person got it. Again, collector. I have some frustrations with Fanatics Collect with, one, why did they decide to extend the auction? Now it only boosted it like a couple $1,000s anyway. Say only a
Right.
couple thousand. Like I mean, it's not my money, but I'm saying like, but
No,
it's stupid.
yeah, right.
And then also the
Yeah.
fact that like if you look at some of the bidding, right around like the 15, so I knew it was going to get to like 10 to 12,000 because some of the people I collect that I talk to were like, I'm going to at least 12. I'm going to at least 10,000, which means they're going to go to like 12 or 13 because they're not going to tell me the actual price. That's when I started to just decide to bow out because I figured if they're going to go that much, then knowing who was going to get it anyway, we knew they were going to go higher than that. But I didn't think that everybody else or this other person was going to do that. I didn't know. I thought it was just kind of weird. Like there was bidding around 15 to 17,000. There wasn't much bidding at the end of the actual auction on Sunday. And then all of a sudden this statement comes out, later, like there was complaints. Like I don't really understand it. Why? I think Fanatics Collect, formerly PWCC, needs to be a little bit transparent with a card sale like this, a significant card sale, as to like what these complaints were about. Like where was this bidding taking place, or this attempt to take the bidding to take place? Because it didn't just affect this card. There's a lot of other cards that were going to end at that time that they pushed everything back to Monday.
Yeah. My issue with PWCC has always been, or Fanatics Collect, whatever, has always been the lack of transparent bidding. And what I mean by that is on eBay, you can at least see bid history. And generally speaking, I think most people feel comfortable when they look at an eBay bid history and they see higher feedback. You get people trying to run up, but I get that with high feedback. But generally speaking, if there's not like a 0, 2, 3 feedback, just kind of bumping you feel typically pretty good about the integrity of the auction, especially if it comports with recent sales and what market value is. With PWCC, I see that Fanatics Collect, you keep seeing these sales that are 10, 20% higher than eBay sales. And it doesn't mean anything nefarious is going on. I'm not implying that, but it is unusual because you can't see what's going on and who's bidding on it. I mean, we accept the fact that the card is paid for, but how it gets to that point, just because I'm willing to pay, $10,000 for it, if there's not another guy and it somehow keeps getting up there, you wonder how that happens. And I know them under prior regimes many moons ago, there was issues with internal shilling and stuff like that. I don't know. I assume that's not the case anymore, but that's always been my issue, which is I can't see what's going on. And when a card goes 4x 2 years ago or whatever, it makes me suspicious, but we at least know who it was, and we know that that's a reason, a likely outcome with a card like this when you have these types of bidders. But
yeah, I'm not going to say that this thing was shilled, but I'm not going to say that it wasn't either, because just of all the circumstances surrounding it and the people that I've talked to that were bidding that dropped out earlier that weren't going at it, that, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that I know every person be bidding on it. It's just the likely people, other than the one that won it. If they dropped out early enough, and I feel confident that they did, like the bidding would just seem kind of weird to me. And I just feel, and then with the circumstance with delaying it, and then there was one extra bid that bumped it up like a couple thousand on that Monday, and that was it. It's like, again, why was that somebody just throwing in that strategically placed bid, knowing that this person probably isn't going to lose it who thought they won it, so we're just going to bump it up a little bit more? I don't know. The circumstances are just weird. I feel like doing that, what Fanatics collected, there just needs to be some transparency with it, but I doubt that we're going to get it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I want to ask you this. This is a listener question. I want to ask you this question because I think it segues nicely into what we want to talk about. A little bit about what these other Favres that we want to talk about. Drake's PC asks, could you discuss why there's seemingly been such a rush over the last couple of years of 90s inserts and parallels when these cards have been out 25 to 30 years and these players are all retired. Can you, before you answer that, can you talk a little bit about some of these things we've seen with Sanders, Rice, Favre, etc.?
So like, I think there's a few reasons why, which I'll get to why that I think that is. I'm not going to say make market predictions, like, and if I am making market predictions, I'm not telling you to like follow them. They're just my opinion. But we've seen, there's a 97 PMG Greenberry Sanders 7 sold for $48,000 in 2020. We know 2020, that was in December of 2020. So it was starting to get hot at that point. Then you had the Rice PMG green sale of $150K, which was that's crazy. Not crazy like that's crazy high, but it's a lot compared to even the Berry sale. That was in 2022, where some could argue in 2022 that started to get like that second peak, right? It seemed like that was really hot then, and then you had 2023 where it went down to 90K. You had a Barry Sanders 24 karat sale of 12,000 in 2023. Gem Masters was just recent and 168,000, and then a Favre Green PMG. So the Favre market is kind of separate from those other two. You had two green sales of 26 and 20,000 in 2023. You compare, that's a Favre PMG green color match. Probably it's one of his better cards. It's on our list in our hierarchy. We both had it higher than the rubies, and that thing sold for less or right around the sale of this ruby. So to put all that kind of together, there's no real correlation with these sales, and it just really comes down to, as we can see, who wants the card, when they want it, when they have the money available, and when they can get it. I think to answer Drake's question, the rush, in my opinion, to it is that when these things pop up, like you're in an area, a crunch between ultra modern in the football market getting kind of the Panini era ending. People are starting to take a step back because you don't have tops yet. They're starting to take a step back and starting to discover 90s cards a little bit more right now, this past year, I feel. And it's really the scarcity of these things. It's not so much even the rarity. Like, we're not even talking about the serial numbers, out of 50, 15, whatever. It's the scarcity. I mean, you can have significant scarcity in a card that's out of 100. I know you've talked, you posted something, you talked a little bit about like cards that are out of 100. It seems like they always get consolidated, which is true. And a lot of collections, like if you need to consolidate, which we'll talk about a little bit later, you start going to like you're out of 100. But like there's cards that are out of 100 in the 90s that are like they might seem like they're out of 15 because they never show up ever. And I think that's the reason why people are rushing right now to get him, because they're starting to look back at these players. There's the nostalgia building up for them, and then they're starting to look at cards that they can possibly pick off as they come up. So when one of these things comes up, they look at the pop reports, the scarcity of them, and they're just like, I got to get it. And they'll just overbid or just rush to get it. And then when somebody, the underbidder doesn't get it, when the next one does come up, it's like, oh, mad rush, I got to get it. I think that's where it seems like there's a rush to it, because people are noticing mainly the scarcity of these cards. Obviously, they're awesome. That's why we have a show about them. But they're noticing the scarcity of the card, not so much the serial number, just the scarcity.
Yeah, true scarcity, right? And to Drake's point, I think pointing out that a lot of these players are retired is important, because I know that, at least for me, when I was coming back into cards in late 2020 and starting where most of us start, which is that kind of ultra modern phase, and seeing how everything's transactional, everything's a commodity. There's not to say that there aren't people that collect ultra modern, but if you're talking about quote unquote nicer cards or high end cards, most of that is modern QBs from Prism Parallels, NTRPAs, flawless autos, that kind of stuff. It's all transactional, and there's so many of them. But it's like day trading, because those quarterbacks and their values fluctuate so drastically week to week, in season, off season, any time of the year. And it's stressful, and it'll burn you out really quickly, because you can lose a lot of money on a card really quickly in ultra modern. And there's some consolation in dealing with these players that are retired, which is that, their careers are known outcomes, and we have all the data about what this player did, what their career accolades were. There's no projection, there's no guessing, and I think that affords a bit of peace of mind to people who are coming into the space to think, well, I buy this nice Peyton Manning card. Is it going to go down a bunch because, his right arm falls off or whatever? But that's with 90s, you don't have that. You just don't have that quite that same problem. Not to say you can't make missteps, but there's a bit of a safer feel to it, especially when you're spending bigger dollars. And I think that people like me and others our age who have come back in, there's people continuously coming into the hobby. There's millions of people collecting, and it's growing every day. And at some point, those people are going to trickle into 90s. Not all of them, but people our age who collected in the 90s who are getting tired of the fake scarcity or the fake rarity in modern are coming back, and they're saying, this is what I wanted. This is what I want to see. These are my childhood idols. Nostalgia is a powerful thing, and this is where I would rather be. And that's going to continue to grow, which is why I don't think that, even though we're in a boom for sure, I don't think it's a bubble. I feel pretty confident in that.
Just look at here. This is the proof that it's not a bubble. If you're collecting in the 90s, if you didn't just start kind of collecting these now, but if you're actually like going to card shows as a kid and you remember, just think back and just remember the 90s. The big thing at that time was the vintage cards, the rookie card boom, right? And the rookie card boom, as we talked about in a previous episode, came from like the 50s, 60s, guys that are our age, but back in the 90s, 40-year-olds and whatever, remembering, I had that box of Mickey Mantle cards that I used to trade with my friends, and my mom threw it out, and God, I wish I would have kept it because now it's worth X, Y, and Z. And it's a rookie card, and now we have to buy rookie cards in the 90s, and that's where the junk wax stuff came and blah, blah, blah. But that, if you think back, that was approximately 30 years-ish from the 90s, the 50s and 60s, okay? Fast forward to now, think back about 30 years-ish, what is most popular? 90s nostalgia stuff. Like, you can just look at any documentary or stuff that's coming out now. It's about the 90s toys, the 90s culture, the 90s trends are all back in now. I remember back in the 90s or in 2000s, it was like the 70s stuff, and the 60s stuff was kind of trendy at the time. And now we fast forward to this period of time, it's the 90s, because it always seems to be about like 30 years-ish. And it's just, in my opinion, it's just starting to gain popularity. I remember the National last year. If you remember the Whatnot booth, remember they were just pumping 90s nostalgia stuff. Do you remember that booth?
I don't know. I just walked right around it.
Well, I only remember it because it was a cool booth. They had like video monitors of like 90s nostalgia stuff. And then right next to it, there was a bunch of like Ninja Turtles action figures and all this stuff. The only reason I bring this up is because the 90s are being pumped right now in terms of clothing, style, trends, movies, the VHS tape grading, the video games, all that stuff. Like 90s is in right now. And that's not because there is some artificial pumping with it, but it's not just that. I think it's just the fact that people our age are starting to are getting into the nostalgia. We call it a midlife crisis. I don't know, but we're buying cards. Okay. And I think it's just turning into the new vintage. I don't want to say the new vintage like I'm trying to replace, like it's better than, vintage cards, but it's that same phase. And we haven't seen a cycle like that because card collecting really became prominent in like the 80s and 90s. So we're in kind of like the second cycle, I think, or the second wave of that type of collecting. And, down the road, maybe there's going to be, 30 years from now, people will be buying, it'll be crazy for prisms. Not like they aren't already, but it's just like, it's a cyclical thing. And I just think it's, we've hit our peak of earning potential, or our earning is going up, and people in their 40s, and they're starting to buy these cards. And you got these funding sources. I think that the fund your cards and the funding sources are just going to keep growing. I mean, I think it's a great business model. I wish I would have thought of it. I wish I had the money to do it, but like to run something like that. But as those keep coming, it's just going to get bigger and bigger, where people can start affording their grails at, like, the drop of a hat. These cards are so scarce. This is helping people afford them. And that means that the sale prices are just going to be higher because people are using different means to fund their cards, or they're not getting like super high interest rates and things like that.
It's a great point. Adam at Chaps Cards, he made that same point to me, which was that, with the advent of programs like Find Your Cards, and now Wharf Sports Cards is doing the same thing with his own slant to it. That, like you say, if I got 45 days, if I've got 90 days to pay off a card, I can afford 10 to 20% more, on that card. And so it's gonna gradually increase prices. Now, I will caveat this with, I don't think either of us is sitting here saying, well, the 97 Rubies Favre, it's only going to go up from here, because I do think that, I do think, like, we saw the 97 green Favre go for $78K, and then it came back to earth, and it settled in around the 20 to 30 mark. And so I don't want that to be like, if you're out there and you're like buying 90s cards, you're going to buy them and everything's going to go up. There's no downside at all, right? Certainly there's, don't take investment advice from us because we're not giving it. But in general, if you're coming into this and I talked to a guy this week, he's interested in, he's buying Ricky Williams cards, and he was asking me sort of some of the sets to start out with. And not that he's in it to make money, but people like that who are interested in coming in here, you don't start them off at a 98 PMG or something like that, because, if there is some volatility, maybe it's there. But in general, I think we can feel pretty good about it. Now, I think we do have to make, this kind of goes with what we talked about earlier, which is market value or worth, and how do we determine that? It's gonna become more difficult, because, for instance, with the 97 Rubies, 2-3 people drive it up to 22K. Does it mean it's worth 22K? If a bulk or the majority of Favre collectors think it's worth 10 to 12, really, does worth then become, with all these mega bidders in here, or deep pockets, I should say, does worth then become reflected by what the fifth person would pay for it? Because you have to kind of account for that top heaviness, which is, if those guys are out of it now, then it could get halved. But that doesn't mean that the necessarily the card is gone down in value. It's just that people might have been overpaying. So you kind of have to read between the lines sometimes to see what's going on.
And there is some precedent to this. This isn't like an isolated thing. I mean, yeah, vintage, there's a higher print run with stuff, but with vintage, you factor in the grading scarcity. So if you look at like trends of just, let's say, Mickey Mantle or Hank Aaron or Willie Mays or something like that, the high end, high grade cards, like there's a big fluctuation in price just based on who's going to pay for it at that time. Like a super high grade Mickey Mantle, like whenever it comes up to auction, it's like it sets another high. And it's kind of like similar to like what we could see down the road with the 90s stuff. It's like whenever these cards come for sale, regardless of the grade, just whenever they appear, because they're so scarce, they're scarce like the high grade vintage. So there is precedent. It kind of follows the same trend. So, I mean, vintage, yeah, it's higher print run, but the scarcity is in the grading. You look at the high grade stuff, it's constantly going up. It's constantly setting new trends because people are just willing to pay like, oh, I'm never going to see this 9 graded copy of this card again. Same with like this, whenever a PMG comes up or a Rubies of like a big player, people are going to come out of the woodwork and pay. Sales like this also brings out cards too. So, I mean, it's a good thing that it does bring out some more scarce cards. Now they're going to be listed at a higher price right now, at least in the short term. I don't know how it's going to affect it long term. I think these types of sales, if you get a multitude of these sales, I think the market's going to be affected by it, because again, Favre is not just, a no name. He's a top 4 um, collected player probably in the 90s roughly for football. And sales like this will say something, to what future, cards will be listed for, regardless of what they are, whether they're, there's a Crusade Red listed right now on eBay. There's a 98 24 karat listed pretty high, but it brings these cards out of the woodwork because they see this sale and they're like, well, God, I got to strike when the iron's hot. And then you get a few more sales that are notable, public sales, and it kind of sets a price, right?
Right. Yeah, I think you're right. There's chasing money, basically, right? Chasing the prior sale. And we talked about that a little bit last week with the Brady legacy and the Griffey legacy and how that first sale doesn't mean that second sale is going to be the same or higher. Maybe it is, but not necessarily. So we have a couple more listener questions. We'll push them to the next episode for the sake of time, because I do want to tie this in specifically what we talked about tonight with developments for, I think, both of us, maybe on the PC front. What have you reevaluated in the last week?
When you see cards like this pop up, you start to realize that I need to be a little bit more, well, at least for me, I need to be a little bit more focused with my Favre PC. I kind of rearranged what I was going for. I was originally going for the gold run for Favre, and it's not like it was like super expensive to complete the gold finest and Bowman Chrome run of him, but I mean it's a few $1,000s all in if I wanted to complete it, depending on what I would get the cards for. I wasn't too far away. I needed a handful of other cards, but I just decided to kind of rearrange my list and focus on really specific, which I consider like grails or my favorite cards or bigger cards of him. So I made a list of roughly, right now it's like 35 cards, and it's got a range of cards that are serial numbered out of 100, but they're super scarce, and it's got cards that are down to in the 50s and 25. But main point is that I decided to kind of do a semi consolidation and just get more focused, because I wanted to be prepared for the time when one of these cards comes up again, and I want to be ready for it, and I didn't want to have to always consolidate. So my consolidation kind of led me to a better list, a more focused list of Favre. But I'm doing that to be prepared for the fact that I don't want to have to consolidate stuff again. I want to really stick to this list moving forward for Favre, and I want to do one for all of my PCs, like my players. I want to limit the amount of team sets in football that I do, because with Packers, as we've talked about, you can get crazy. Like if collecting a Packer, just being a Packers collector in general is very tough. Then trying to put together these team sets is even more difficult because of a number of different factors. The collectors, they're popular with non-Packers fans and all that, but just kind of limiting what I'm looking at. I still do, as you don't do it, but I do the Prism Gold stuff, like the modern Packers. I like that. So when there's Prism Golds coming up of like key players like Clay Matthews or Devontae Adams, like I'll pick them up, but I'm not going to go get a bunch of like, random cards of theirs. I'm going to limit those PCs to just like gold Prism Golds, because that's what I like. And then I'm not going to go get every high-end team set for the Packers, because I want to be able to, I'm collecting Rodgers too. So that's another branch that's expensive. So I'm just really trying to get more focus lists with these guys. I would buy like any cool looking Favre card that came up, and I'm not going to do it. It helps me calm down a little bit and just really focus strategically card to card as it comes up. Now Brewers is different because it's cheaper collection. I have a list of team sets and player runs and stuff that I'll just keep doing, because it's at the end of the day, it's not as much. But when it gets to the Packers stuff, and specifically Favre, like if I want to get his better stuff, I really have to start being a little bit more disciplined. But what are you doing? Where's your next move, and where are you at?
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, I've when the 97 Rubies appeared on PWCC, my first thought was awesome. This is great. Contact fund your cards. You go get it. And then even before I knew that I wasn't going to get it because I wasn't going to go that high, part of me was like, I don't know. I mean, it's going to be expensive. Like we estimated 10 to 12 at the time. And that's going to cause me to cut a decent amount of stuff. And so the question was, can I wait on it? and given what I have gotten of Favre this year, I was okay with that. What I'm trying to pay attention to a lot is I've had to consolidate a lot of different times over the last year, and trying to pay attention to what is going each time. What am I getting rid of? And it's the 100 cards for sure. It's the common cards, because that assessment always comes down to, that exercise always comes down to what's replaceable. And so I've have lists for player PCs, and I've cut a lot of the 100 stuff on there, because I realized that I had it on there more from like completionism purposes than I did, oh, I really want this card. It was more like, well, I want to have 20 cards of this guy, and here's how I fill it out. But if I have 13 that I really like, the extra 7 really don't matter. And it's also freed me up a little bit, I think, to explore this idea of branching out a little bit in baseball, to add other players from different sets. And I'm sort of testing myself, because I generally have a predisposition to try to, I buy one card of a player, then it becomes a player PC, right? You go down that road. It's 2, then 3, then 4. And I laser focus it. So I'm trying to, like, I bought a card of a guy I don't collect, and I'm trying to do that a little bit with some of these sets, like 97 Grand Finale for baseball. I don't own a card from that set, and so Pedro's not in it. And if Bagwell and Guerrero aren't up, I lost on a Guerrero earlier this year, I'd like to have one. And so if it's somebody I liked watching, or Crusade Red, same thing. So I'm trying to branch out a little bit with doing maybe like a miscellaneous collection of different players from different sets. Whether that survives, I don't know. But I think to myself, well, at the end of the day, at least that's creating, it's enjoyable, and then it's creating something of, if for instance, one of my main player PCs, a big one comes up, I've got a decent trade pool here. Hopefully I don't have to use it, and I can enjoy these. But I also have potential to trade for, I don't know, something big that comes up. And so, that's kind of what I've been focused on, and there's some relief in the rubies, 97 rubies going so high, not because, well, I can't get it, but more so because it made the decision for me to stay out of it, and to not even get my hopes up about getting it.
I think that's always been the struggle with the baseball side of things, being a Brewer collector. That's always been the struggle for me, that the Brewers weren't really in some of these 90s sets that I really want to get. There's a handful of cards, and I've tossed around the idea. I know I've talked to you about this in football, and I've went down the road of, starting like a Terrell Davis PC and a small, Emmitt Smith one and all that, but it all seemed to just consolidate. So like with football, Favre is in a lot of the great sets, so I don't have to worry about that. And when it comes to like the 2000s, I love Prism Golds, and I got Aaron Rodgers. He's the Prism era for the Packers, and it's easy for me. So the Packers and and football side of things, it's easy for me just to collect Packers. But when it comes to Brewers, there's some sets that I really want to get like one card of, and like of a player that I enjoyed watching. So there's a chance down the road that I might dabble in the, that miscellaneous nostalgia cool set type PC. But I think the way that I would look at, so that I don't end up consolidating, is I'm going to have to be real strategic as to when I buy it. Like, I'm going to make sure that I'm satisfied, mainly not the Brewer stuff, because again, that's not a ton of money in that. But when it comes to like the Favre and the Rodgers, I need to be in a good place with the Favre and the Rodgers to know, like, okay, even if like a bigger card does come up, I'm happy with my PC right now, where I'm not going to go and do a mass consolidation of this miscellaneous baseball PC that I just started and then go down that road again. So I think I'm just, and even saying it for you, like maybe being strategic about your placement when you buy it. Don't be in such a rush where you have to get 5 or 6 of them right away, because then when you overextend yourself with those, then it's like, that a big Favre is going to come up and you'll be like, damn, I'm going to just sell it off. So I think just maybe one every year. Maybe you do it like one a year. You know what I mean? Like a big player, big card, one a year, and then you'll be less likely to sell it. That's just the way that I look at how I might attack it down the road.
Yeah, that's true. And I encountered that earlier this week. I was looking at like a Maddox, and I'm like, do I really want to pay? Do I really want to pay for this particular Maddox, or is it that I just want a Maddox and I'd be happy with something that's lower value? So something I've considered for sure. We've had some big changes, obviously, in our collecting over the last week. The Favre market's changed a lot. I'm heading to the National tomorrow. I'll be back next week. We've got some great interviews lined up for the next few episodes, and talking some baseball, some football, and we have a couple of sets lined up. But I'll throw this invitation out: if there are some 90s sets that you love, that you would like to hear sort of a, I don't know, dissertation about, we could focus an episode on that set, because not that we're out of ideas, but we're open to what people want to hear. So reach out to us on Instagram, YouTube, listen to us on Spotify and Apple. This is Zan here with Brian, signing off. We'll catch you next week.